feel every day. So, Tom, if you could make me host, I am going to share my screen now for this evening's presentation.
Just made you the host there.
Thanks.
And if you could just make me the host back again, I'll just continue to let people in.
Yep.
Brilliant, thank you.
Can you see my screen okay, Tom?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah, everyone will be able to see it now.
Excellent. Neurodiversity in recruitment, how to get it right. I'm going to be telling you three things in tonight's presentation. I'm going to tell you, first of all, what neurodiversity actually is and go through some of the conditions in a bit more detail. And then I'm going to tell you why it's important to be inclusive. And then finally, I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can make your recruitment inclusive. So that's only three things, not too much, right? Tonight's talk is all about you. So if you don't understand anything, you want to jump in with a question, that's fine. If you want to ask something, you can raise your hand or use the chat, whatever you feel comfortable doing. You want to go out and get a tea and come back. Whatever you're comfortable with is fine. By the way, I didn't know what you look like, so I've chosen to represent you tonight with this picture of a baby hedgehog, because I think that's something we can all relate to. A lot of us are a little bit spiky on the outside, but quite soft underneath. And also, if anything comes up tonight in this that you kind of relate to, or someone you know relates to it, I've got all my contact details at the end. You're welcome to get in touch with me. I do signposting with all of these, so I can help you get more support and so on if you need it. So let's get cracking. I should probably introduce myself properly. I'm Rachel Morgan-Trimmer. I'm a neurodiversity consultant, and that means I train companies on neurodiverse inclusion, so how to recruit inclusively, how to be inclusive at work, and I also do courses for neurodiverse people to help them with things like time management and communication skills and so on. I am a white, middle-aged, middle-class person who wrote this book I sort of put there in my background called How to Treat Autistic People. My company is called Sparkle Class, and I co-founded the Neurodiversity Association, which is a professional association for people who do a similar job to me to kind of maintain standards and develop professionally and so on. So what is neurodiversity? I'm sure you've heard this term, but there are a lot of slightly different definitions as to what it is. It's an umbrella term for a group of conditions or ways of being that differ from the majority of people. These conditions include dyslexia, which you're probably the most familiar with, dyspraxia, which is also known as developmental coordination disorder, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, dysgraphia, which is a fancy term for messy handwriting, and dyscalculia, which is difficulty with numbers and numerical information. And today I'm going to go through the first four in a little bit more detail, just to give you a bit more of an understanding of what it's actually like to live with these conditions. I myself have ADHD and I'm also autistic, and I'm mildly dyspraxic. I also have quite a weird condition that goes with autism sometimes, and that's called prosopagnosia. And it's also known as face blindness, which is difficulty recognizing people. And I revealed this to a group of people yesterday, and somebody said to me, do you ever use that as an excuse for ignoring people? And I was like, oh, no, I'd never do that. I do really. Yeah, if I don't want to talk to someone, even if I recognize them, oh yeah, sorry, it's my face blindness. So yeah, that's neurodiversity, and that's some of the conditions that I have. So I want to crack on by having you read this recipe. It's a recipe for Victoria Sponge. I'd like you to have a go at reading this. It's a little bit tricky, isn't it? It's not written very, very well. It's not easy to read. There's weird spaces all over it. It's quite tricky, isn't it? What I'd like you to do, if you can, is actually start to move away from the screen and see if you can see a shape forming. I mean, you try scrunching your eyes up. Can you see a shape within the text? It's a fish. And this is to demonstrate a little bit about how dyslexics see. We always think of them as having difficulty with words and reading, which is true, but they were the first ones to be able to see that shape of the fish. Dyslexia is characterized by seeing in shapes rather than detail. And here are some of the common characteristics you'll find with dyslexia. The biggest, most defining one is challenges with reading, writing, and spelling. And that's why dyslexics struggle so much at school and in our world, because we live in a world of words, don't we? If you don't have to read, dyslexia is not really a problem. They have difficulty things order right getting in there. Trouble with sequencing and so on. They can read words like this more easily. Now, in this sentence, each word has the first and last letter in the correct place, but the letters within the words are all jumbled up. And that's how a lot of dyslexics see words anyway. They just see the sort of outside shape of it. So when the letters really are jumbled up, a dyslexic can actually read that more easily than somebody without dyslexia. Dyslexics are creative and they're insightful because they can see things in such a different way from everybody else. They can solve problems very easily. They can join things together. They can see patterns. They can see shapes. And because they can't always do the same things that other people can, if it's to do with words, they need to come up with creative solutions to some of the challenges that they face. They're visual and spatial thinkers. You will see a lot of dyslexics in fields like architecture is a big one, because you have to see in 3 dimensions, don't you? It's something I can't do. And you will also see a lot of dyslexia in something like visual arts, graphic design, things like that. In fact, at somewhere like the Royal Academy, I think it is 40% of the artists there are dyslexic. Some dyslexics are poor. Because dyslexics have such trouble at school, not all of them, but a lot do, and aren't helped and are shamed for having dyslexia. A lot of them don't progress through the education system very well, and they end up, not being able to overcome that. So you see a lot of dyslexia in things like homeless populations and prison populations, but that's not universal. Some dyslexics are loaded. In fact, 25% of British CEOs are dyslexic, according to Chief Executive magazine, and 40% of British self-made millionaires are also dyslexic, because they have to find their own way, they're good at problems, solving problems and having these ideas and so on. So that's why so many entrepreneurs have dyslexia. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking maybe you'd like one of these dyslexics as your next partner if they've got so much money. And if that is what you're thinking, I've got a word of warning for you. They won't text you back. There's 2 reasons for this. One is that it takes dyslexic people longer to text because of their challenges with reading and writing. So it might take them a longer time. They might not have time to text you back. But it's also the case that a lot of dyslexics have been shamed for poor spelling, for example, or using the wrong word. And they are sometimes embarrassed, or they fear judgment if they send a text which isn't spelt correctly. So next up, I would like you to grab your bit of paper and we're going to do some origami. I would like you to make this crane. You're waiting for the instructions to come up on screen, aren't you? No, there aren't any. I'm just expecting you to make this crane without any instructions, no step-by-step, no pictures or anything. It's hard, isn't it? Unless you're an origami master, I'm not. I didn't even make this actually. You can't do it. You need instructions, you need steps. And that's being asked to do something like that is a little bit like how it is for dyspraxic people. Dyspraxia can be characterized as a disconnect between the brain and the body. So some of the common characteristics you might find in a dyspraxic are difficulty with fine and or gross motor movements. So a fine motor movement is something like origami, or using a pencil, or using a mouse, something you do with, with your fingers. And then a gross motor movement might be something like, riding a bike, or I know some dyspraxics have trouble driving a car, things that you do with your whole body. That's what it's characterized by. if you're dyspraxic, you can't advertise women's sanitary products. That's a funny one, isn't it? Why is that? This is a bit of a joke, really, but it does hold true that, you know, all those activities that women are doing on sanitary product ads, they're all things that dyspraxics really struggle with. So it's things like playing tennis and going swimming and riding a horse and riding a bike, all stuff like that is hard for dyspraxic people. But on the plus side, it's easy to feel like you're in a romantic comedy. You know, when those scenes where the girl comes out and she's clutching the papers and she walks straight into the man, the handsome man, and she drops her papers and he helps her pick her up, and then shenanigans ensue. Dyspraxic people tend to do that kind of thing quite a lot. We tend to, you know, we're clumsy, so we walk into people and we drop our stuff and so on. Dyspraxics are creative problem solvers. This is because dyspraxic people they want to do the things, but they find it difficult to, so they find different ways of doing things. One of my colleagues is more severely dyspraxic with me, and he likes to work out, he likes to go to the gym, but he can't always coordinate himself properly, so he has to find different ways of exercising so he can do what he wants to do. Dyspraxics are also persevering because it's difficult for dyspraxics to learn things like riding a bike or learning to swim, but they still want to do them. They keep at it until they can do it, and most of them do learn these things. It just takes them a little bit longer. Dyspraxics have poor proprioception. It's a tough word, isn't it? Proprioception is knowing where your body is in relation to everything else. So if you were to reach out now, reach your finger out towards your computer and stop it before it touches the screen, you'd probably be able to get quite close. But for a dyspraxic, they would either stop far away because they're afraid of touching it, or they would stop, you know, they would actually end up touching the screen, because knowing where your finger ends and where the screen starts is much more difficult for a dyspraxic person. And trouble saying stuff like poor proprioception. Many dyspraxics have trouble with their mouth and forming words, so struggle to speak clearly sometimes. Right, we're going to play a little memory game now, and Tom, I need your help here. I'm going to, thank you. I am going to be showing you some moving images, and I would like Tom to describe them in case you can't see my screen. So what you need to do, I want you to try and remember as much as you can about what I'm about to show you. Okay, is everybody ready? Okay.
To anyone who can't see the screen, as Rachel said, we've got first of all we have the kitten falling asleep. We now have a dog with a butterfly on its nose.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So you all saw that, right? So we had the cat falling asleep, then we had the baby with the balloon, and then we had the dog with the butterfly on its nose. Yep. You didn't see the baby. There was no baby with a balloon.
I was hoping I'd done my job properly, but I don't remember seeing it personally.
No baby with the balloon. There wasn't actually a baby with a balloon, because this isn't really a memory game. This is a simulation, and it's a simulation of what it's like to have ADHD, and it's based on a real experience that I had myself. And I had this experience at I went on a listening course. That's an example of how people with ADHD don't think things through. What was it? I've got ADHD and I went on a listening course. Obviously, it wasn't going to go very well, and it didn't. But during this course, the trainer showed us some videos. They're about people talking about when people don't listen, and obviously I wasn't really paying attention. And then he asked some questions about the videos afterwards. And I don't answer questions and things like that because I get it wrong, or I'm not paying attention or whatever. So he asked a question about the first video, and everyone said, oh, they're talking about this and they're talking about that. And then he said, what about the second video? And I was like, I wasn't listening to what everyone else was saying. I was staring out the window. They're saying, what they'd seen and so on. And then he said, and what about the third video? And then I kind of stopped paying attention. I was like, hang on, wait a second. There weren't 3 videos, there were 2. He's playing a trick on us. And I waited for everyone to say, like you just did, there were only 2. But they started answering questions about the last video, the last one that I remembered. And I was like, And I was thinking about it and I thought, there were 3 videos. I'd just seen them and I'd not only forgotten what was in the second video, I'd forgotten it existed. And that's how severe ADHD is. It's not just forgetting, it's actually forgetting that you've forgotten. So let's have a look at ADHD. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I have it myself, as I mentioned, and I think of it as like being a space cadet, you know, head in the clouds. Now, I've been criticized for calling it, you know, saying I feel like a space cadet, but, you know, that's actually how I feel. So after I received this criticism, I went out and bought a t-shirt that says space cadet on it. And I would have worn it for you today, but it's in the wash because obviously ADHD don't plan very well. It's a nice shirt though. Let's have a closer look at some of the characteristics you find in a person with ADHD. So, oh, sorry about that. There are 2 types. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is the one that you're probably more familiar with. It's the hyperactive kind. It's the little boy kind. It's a stereotype. People bouncing around, Tigger off Winnie the Pooh, always boinging about, never shuts up, and so on. Type 2, which is what I have, is the inattentive kind. That's a staring out of the window. That's a daydreaming, the head in the clouds. And you can also have, you can have both types at the same time. Some people have the combined type. So some characteristics: we are forgetful. We're easily distracted. So I don't know if you noticed earlier, I was looking over here. That's because my cat came in the room and started walking around on my desk. We are forgetful. We are messy. Lots of people with ADHD do live in quite messy houses. You can see my shelves are reasonably tidy. It's a very good thing that you can't see the floor in here because it's an absolute tip. We're creative. People with ADHD have ideas going all the time. You think of new stuff, new projects, new ideas, and that's one of the real fun parts of having ADHD. And we're also good at, you know, like any neurodiverse person, we're good at creative problem solving. We are inconsistent. We can hyper focus. This is one of my favorite things about ADHD. If we are in a state of flow, if we're like really into something, really interested in something, we can focus on that to the exclusion of, you know, almost anything else. I was on a tube train a long time ago, back when I lived down south, and there was a poem on it, on one of the ad spaces, and I really liked it, but I didn't have pen and paper to write it down, so I just memorized it. And that kind of thing is easy for me. So that's why I managed to pass my exams despite not really doing any work, because I was able to, when I wanted to, I could just memorize massive chunks of things. And that's one of the great things about ADHD. We can be very disorganized. We can multitask. This is another of my my favorite things about ADHD. Everyone says, oh, you can't really multitask, blah, blah, blah. If you've got ADHD, you can, because it's all you've ever done. You know, you're used to processing multiple streams of information at the same time all the time. So I'm doing this, and I'm also, you know, I can see out of my window and I can process somebody without a shirt just walked into his house over there, and I can, you know, I can do that and think about everything all at once. And that's why you find people with ADHD in jobs where multitasking is really important. Things like being a surgeon, for example, where you need to have, you know, lots of different things going on, or anything to do with events, you know, like stage management, where you need to think about many things all at once. We're good under pressure. In fact, people with ADHD are so good under pressure that if that pressure doesn't exist, we will create it. And that's why we're always late. That's why we're always leaving things to the last minute. We don't have enough dopamine in our brain. That's a reward chemical, you know, you get when you get a good surprise. That's the same one that's triggered in gambling, stuff like and addiction. So if we don't, because we don't have enough of that, we will create a situation where we can get that dopamine hit by doing something just in time. And of course, we have difficulty finishing anything. If you go round to the house of somebody with ADHD, you will find it littered with with equipment for unfinished projects. So if you came into my office in here, down the side of this shelf, you would find a mic for a podcast series that I was going to start. I gave up after one. If you went downstairs, you would find a bag of knitting with half knitted items that were started, you know, several years ago, and so on. We like starting, we like new, and we don't always get to finish stuff. Right, I've asked you for pen and paper. If you haven't got it, this is for this little drawing exercise we're going to do. If you haven't got pen and paper, you can use your phone to draw on if you can. If you don't want to do that, or you don't have the facility, you can picture what I'm asking you to draw instead, because you can still join in that way. Or you can just sit and stare out the window if you want, it doesn't bother me. So anyway, I would like you to grab your pen and paper if you have it to hand, or pencil, and I would like you to draw a bat and ball, please. And I'll just give you a moment to do that. So, because everyone's got their I'm just looking through. Everyone's got their camera off, so I don't know if you've finished, or if everyone's brave enough to turn their camera on and show me what you've drawn. You can unmute yourself if you want to attract my attention. I think everyone's being very quiet today and not wanting to show their drawing. Okay, so what you've probably drawn is along the lines of something like this table tennis bat and a small table tennis ball, or it might be a bat and ball from another game, such as a cricket bat or a baseball bat and a slightly different kind of ball. But you've probably drawn a bat and a ball. But that's not what I asked you to draw. So if you've drawn that, you've done it wrong. I actually said bat and ball. So here we have a picture of a cricket bat this time, and a ball like the wild pig, the animal, the wild boar. So if you did hear me correctly and you drew a bat and ball, you've still done it wrong, because that's not what I meant. I actually meant a bat, as in the animal, the bat that flies around at night, and a bore, as in a boring person. And I've done a little cartoon version of myself here because I can be quite boring sometimes. So first of all, I gave you information that was unclear. But what I also did was I blamed you for it, didn't I? I said something that made absolutely no sense. A bat, the animal, and a boring person, that doesn't make any sense at all. You heard bat and ball because that makes perfect sense. That's a thing, isn't it? That's a thing that we used to play games. So that's what you drew. Bat and ball makes no sense. But I blamed you for the misunderstanding. The fact that I said something that didn't make any sense and I didn't pronounce it clearly enough that you would hear or explain it enough. And that's a little bit how it is being autistic. When there is a communication breakdown, when people say things to us that don't make any sense to us, we tend to get told off for it. We tend to get the blame for it and told that we're doing it wrong, even though it's not our fault that we didn't understand what you were getting at. So autism is a really complicated condition, and it's hard to sum up, but I love the way that the Maoris do. You know, the Maoris, the people who live in New Zealand, their word for autism translates as in their own time and place, which I think is really lovely because it sums it up in a very sort of positive and realistic way. So you've probably heard of the autistic spectrum, and most people think it looks something like this. So you've got normal at one end, you've got a bit autistic in the middle, and over there you've got Rain Man. When Rain Man came out was the first time I actually heard the word autistic, but I didn't think I was autistic because I wasn't really very much like Dustin Hoffman's character in that film. He won an Oscar for that. Did you know that? And I always thought that was a bit of a switch because he didn't have that many lines. And to play a stereotypical autistic, you only need one facial expression. So that's possibly something for Nicole Kidman to think about for her next role. The autistic spectrum looks a lot more like this. It's like a color spectrum, like a rainbow. So you have different things on it in different places. So what we find, here are some examples. You have, you might have rigid thinking, rigid behavior, crap social skills, very common. Some autistics are non-speaking. Lots of autistics are good at maths. That's a stereotype, isn't it? Obsessive interests is almost universal amongst autistics. And of course, many of us are weird about being touched. But it's more complicated than that. So, for example, I'm good at maths, but because of the ADHD, I can't really concentrate enough to actually do anything there's any, that shows that I'm good at maths. People cover up crap social skills by pretending everything is fine. Non-speaking, that can be by choice or not by choice. Obsessive interest, that suddenly got very big there. I myself like Hello Kitty, but I wouldn't say I'm obsessed with it. So that kind of exists outside the spectrum for me. Gastrointestinal issues can be the cause of some of that rigid thinking and behavior, not maybe not wanting to eat certain things because they're going to upset your stomach, or it might be nothing to do with that, and it might just be a coexisting condition with autism. Lots and lots of people with autism have coexisting conditions like hypermobility, or prosopagnosia is one, or Tourette's is also very common. Depression often runs through it, and ADHD also leads to depression, and depression can be the cause of some of those gastrointestinal issues. And of course, being depressed means that you need to be touched, but of course you're weird about being touched unless it's someone on a very specific list that only makes sense to you. Anxieties come in there, it's in the wrong color and the wrong font for some reason. That leads to coping strategies, and depression leads to coping strategies, and ADHD leads to coping strategies. And suddenly pretending everything is fine isn't really working anymore. So you start drinking, and that leads to more depression, and there's a completely irrelevant banana. So you can see it's a really complicated picture, and it makes it hard to diagnose not just autism, but everything else that's going on as well. So I'm moving on to the next bit of my talk now. Why should you care about neurodiversity? You've understood some of the things that people like me and people who aren't like me experience. So why should you care about it in a business context? Why should you actually make the effort to be inclusive? Well, there's two reasons. The first is what I call the fluffy reason. It's right to be inclusive. You might have an autistic nephew, or your partner might have ADHD, or your brother's dyslexic, or whatever it might be. So you've seen firsthand some of the challenges people face. It's the right thing to do to be inclusive. But the other reason, which I'm going to go into more detail, is money. Being inclusive to neurodiverse people makes perfect economic sense, and I'll show you why. Here are the benefits to hiring neurodiverse staff, backed up by actual science. So first off, we are 30% more productive. And if you don't want any other reason to be inclusive to neurodiverse people, the fact that we're at least 30% more productive should be enough on its own. When you make these conditions even better, that goes up to 50%, 90%, or even 140%. Now that first figure, the 30%, is from the Harvard Business Review. Sorry, I trip over my words sometimes. Those other figures are from a JP Chase Autism at Work program, when they had specific autism hiring process with a specific program for them, and it went up to 140% more productive when those autistic people were allowed to do things exactly the way they wanted them to. So you can see that's absolutely staggering. 30%, when I heard the 30% figure first, I was like, that's really quite incredible. And seeing how much more neurodiverse people can do is just insane. We learn faster. So this same JP Chase program with the autistic people, they were finding that the autistic cohort got things sorted in 3 months. Well, they learned things in 3 months that were taking other people 2 years. And there was another case of an autistic job seeker that I read about, which was that they said, you need Java for this job and you don't know Java. And he said, oh, I'll learn it. And they were like, well, we need you next week. And he learned it over the weekend. So it's not just autistic people, dyslexics, because they can see so quickly, they can get hold of a concept very, very quickly. And of course, with ADHD, your brain's going so quickly that you just pick things up very, very fast. 56% of adaptations for neurodiverse people cost nothing. So some people think, oh, it's going to cost us loads of money. We need software. The autistic person needs like their own room and blah, blah. It's not really true. Most of the adaptations are cheap. They're simple. The ones that do cost money tend to be on the cheap side. You're talking one pair of noise cancelling headphones, for example. It's not big stuff, or just shoving somebody's desk over near a window. It's cheap stuff. 76% of job seekers are looking for an inclusive workplace. That's according to Glassdoor. So when you're being inclusive to the neurodiverse people, you're also attracting those people who aren't neurodiverse, who want to work in a diverse, positive, collaborative, inclusive workspace. Universal accommodations benefit everyone. I really like this one because you might make an adaptation for a neurodiverse employee, but you offer it to everybody. And you find that the other people are suddenly benefiting from that as well. So take flexible working, for example. You offer flexible working because, say, somebody with ADHD would rather get up late and work into the evening, or your autistic employee doesn't want to get on the tram in rush hour because everybody smells weird and they stand too close. Fine. So they have flexible working. But you offer that to other people, and who are you benefiting? You're benefiting somebody with kids. You're benefiting somebody who maybe have a chronic condition. You're benefiting you when you've got to go to the dentist. You're benefiting somebody who wants to take their nan to the hospital. You benefit everybody by having these accommodations. Neurodiverse staff understand your neurodiverse clients. So if you had a client who had some neurodiverse condition and you didn't understand why they were doing a thing, your neurodiverse staff member would be able to tell you very quickly and easily, or have a good guess, or have that understanding of that person and help you resolve issues and come to a greater understanding and work more collaboratively. And finally, inclusive workplaces have lower staff absence, high performance, better collaboration, and more innovation, and that results in increased revenue. So it is basically, it's all about money. I mean, it's great that you want to be inclusive. I'm all for that. But the business decision, it stands on its own. So finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do inclusive recruitment right when we talk about neurodiverse inclusion. Now, I teach a 6-hour course on this. I'm squashing this into my top 3 points. So this is not, it's obviously not everything, but it's kind of the 3 basic starting points for you. You can take these away today and start thinking about it and start building your own ways of being inclusive. First of all, though, I've got a little puzzle for you. How many triangles can you see? So some people say 2, some people say 6, some people say 8. And some people get the correct answer, which is none of those. The correct answer is 0. There aren't any triangles in this diagram. You're seeing them, you're seeing the space where a triangle is created, or you're seeing where a triangle shape might be, but there aren't any actual triangles. And the point I'm trying to convey with this fun little puzzle is that you're seeing something that's not there. And when it comes to neurodiversity, sometimes particularly with some clients, they see problems that aren't there. So you talk about inclusion and you talk about, trying to attract and recruit more neurodiverse talent. And suddenly they say, what about this? What about that? And they see a problem that just doesn't exist. So my first point is try not to see problems that aren't there. The second thing is to either throw out the rule book. You don't have to throw out the entire rule book, but maybe try rewriting some bits of it. And do you know what? All of us are guilty, me included, of saying we're doing the thing this way because that's how we've always done it. And we don't always think, actually, could there be a better way to do this? What if that way is not working for this person or that person or this huge group of people that we want to attract, this huge group of talented people that we want to get involved? So looking at the way you do things and starting to think about how you might adapt some of those is a really good starting point for inclusion. This is an actual business book that I found in the back of a chocolate factory in York. I was having a tour and I was booted out to the back, so I didn't eat all the chocolate, and I found this library. And I found this book called The Human Factor in Business, 1921, written by Benjamin Seaborn Rowntree, who of course was one of the pioneers of chocolate production in York, which is why it's in the back of this factory. But Rowntree was also a pioneer in how he treated his staff, how he treated people at work. So he'd do things like, he was one of the first people to put showers in his factory, not so you could shower when you got to work, so you could shower before you went home, so you weren't embarrassed to be mucky on the tram. And he also did things like strengths-based hiring. So he would get people into his factory, he'd give them a test to see how quickly they could sort things, sort shapes out, like, you know, those little kids shape sorters. And if they were good at it, they'd be on the box chocolates line to put, you know, the black magic into the right thing, because they were the quickest. And what's interesting to me is that this book was written in 1921, that's 100 years ago, and we're still not doing all of the things that he recommended. So it's a slow pace of change, but if you start looking, you know, like Roundtree did, looking at better ways of doing things, then you get better staff and better production and better collaboration. And the last thing is to educate yourself. I have spoken to an awful lot of recruiters over the past few months. I'm writing a white paper on neurodiversity in recruitment. And when I said, what is the issue about, you know, what can we do to solve the neurodiversity employment gap? Because not enough neurodiverse talent is being recruited right now. And every single one of them said the same thing, and that's education. We need to educate ourselves. That includes me. I don't pretend to know everything. We all need to educate ourselves, but we also need to educate other people. So if you're a consultant, that means your clients, trying to talk to your clients about maybe modifying an interview process, or maybe, you know, having different expectations from a CV, that sort of thing. And it's, if you're internal, it's also about educating your other teams, why a neurodiverse person is going to be such an asset, the talents that they bring, you know, the skills that they've got, why it's a good thing to be inclusive, and how easy it is to make, you know, minor adjustments, minor adaptations, and how inclusion doesn't have to be this massive problem that some people think it is. So what have you learned today? Hopefully you've learned what neurodiversity is, you've learned why you should care about it, and you've learned a little bit about how to start being inclusive. But what's the secret sauce in all this? What's the one thing that holds all this together? It's attitude. None of this is going to work unless people have the right attitude, unless you want to be inclusive, unless you want to, you know, take those steps and learn more and actually do the things that you need to do to attract and retain neurodiverse talent. And the brilliant thing is that you've already taken the first step. You've already done it. You've got that attitude that we need, because you've turned up to this. If you've come to this, you said you want to learn, you want to you know, start doing things a bit differently, maybe you want to understand why it's important and so on. And that's brilliant, because one thing about neurodiverse people is that we have had a lifetime of being excluded. We've been, you know, shamed at school for not being able to learn properly. Even in the workplace, we've been left out, we've been told off. We've had people say, I can't understand why you can't do this. And socially, a lot of us have also been isolated. So when you come to us and say, oh yeah, we do want to include you, we want you here, we want your strengths, we want your skills, we want to celebrate those things. I mean, that's going to mean a lot to any person, but for a neurodiverse person, it means so much more. And so for that, in conclusion, all I want to say is thank you. Before I stop sharing my screen, I want to leave you with my contact details if you want to get in touch with me for whatever reason. I am currently redoing my garden, so if you've got any gardening tips, I would quite appreciate those. My potatoes have not turned out very well this year. So if you've got gardening tips or you want to talk about neurodiversity, my website is sparkleclass.com. On LinkedIn, I am Rachel Morgan Trimmer. I'm the only Rachel Morgan Trimmer on there, so you won't get the wrong one. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I don't always tweet about vegetables. It's at sparkleclass. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. That was amazing. I honestly, I really love that presentation. It's for me, obviously, I'm putting this event on to help clients and help people that are in my network. But we're going to be hiring for recruiters to work for our team, and I think it's something I've never looked at before. So it's opened my eyes massively to you know, people that we could be not including, and adjustments we could be making as well. I just want to let you know as well that we have maybe not questions as such, but comments that have come through on the chat function. So I just want to go from the top. Okay, so we've got, let me look. What I might try and do as well, actually, I might make you the host so you can see all the chat. Would that be okay?
I can see the chat actually.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. Yeah, so you've got quite a few things actually. A lot of people sort of talking up your presentation like me. And then obviously if anyone has any questions as well, feel free to put them in.
I can see Joe Farmer said she's they've got symptoms of all, diagnosis autistic, awful handwriting, late to cycle. Yeah, I also have terrible handwriting. Somebody said it's like a spider walked in some ink and then walked across the page. So yeah, Joe, do drop me a line afterwards if you'd like to. I think Gavin's got his hand up. Are you able to unmute Gavin?
Gavin, are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted.
Excellent.
Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Gavin. How are you?
Yeah, cool bananas, as they say. Like you, I'm also neurodiverse. I'm also the coordinator for Dyspraxia. I'm here to represent Dyspraxia Foundation. I'm also autistic, dyspraxic, and dyslexic. I'm an academic at London South Bank University, and I'm also a researcher for the Employment Association URSA. So I'm an associate. It's something you may want to look into. Is an organization called URSA, and I think you'll fit in well there. One of the conversations I've been having in a comms meeting today is youth transition into the world of work, and how employers actually look at individuals, particularly youth. One of the things that they're saying to employees and employers, where youth who are neurodiverse come from a sheltered environment where they are accommodated, where there is no need in their ecosystem to have adjustments because they already exist within the framework, with the environment that they have. However, when they get to employment, there's reasonable adjustments, there's all the sort of language of inclusion, and they get to an interview and they say, well, I don't really need that because I come from an ecosystem that's fine. I don't even know what that is. And so they flunk the interview. Then they hit a brick wall and they're traumatized by, this happens over and over. So they don't really, so employers who are doing new hires, transitioning from school, really need to understand the environments that youth who are neurodiverse are coming from into their employment space. So if they're coming from a supported environment where that ecosystem is, where they don't have to make excuses or adjustments for their existence, as I like to say, we're all in a variation on the theme of the experience of being human. And we are that in an ecosystem. So when we transition into the employment space, we would hope that we wouldn't have to make any adjustments at all, because that ecosystem already exists with all the adjustments that are needed.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not something that, that's something we all love to exist. And, we're working towards a world where that, systemic inclusion is what it's known as, where you don't make the adjustments for specific people, but you just have a space where everybody can be included and everyone can do their best work.
Yes, that's right. And I think we're all doing that as neurodiversity ambassadors. Yeah. We're all trying to get that language out there and understand what that means. I commend you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Gavin.
We're all on the same page. And if you're happy to connect with me, I'm on Twitter, Dyspraxia Lambeth.
I think I follow you.
Do you now?
I think so.
That's scary.
Yeah, I follow quite a few.
You're welcome to. And do you follow Amanda Kirby's work?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I know Amanda Kirby and Nancy Doyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, well, we can connect and talk about your potatoes.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Good to talk to you. Cheers.
Thanks, Gavin. Tom, did you want me to read the questions out of the chat, or did you want to do it?
Either or, really. I mean, where are you up to?
I just don't want to miss anyone. I've got one from Julie, who asks, do you have any best practice examples of timescales for providing candidates with interview questions in advance? That's a great question, because obviously this is one of the more common things that people do, is give you the questions in advance. In terms of timescales, that's a really tricky one, because you know, if someone's autistic, they'll want it in advance enough to be able to prepare adequately. If you give it to somebody with ADHD, they'll forget about it till the last minute. So it just varies. You can always ask the person. I think just what's behind Julie's question is really good, though. It's actually thinking through giving them in advance. So the when is actually less important than the fact that she's actually thought of this in the first place. And the other thing I would say about interview questions is there's something called semantic prompting, which is asking what, I mentioned it to you before we started, Tom. It works miles better if you have a clear, concise question. Because if you say to me, tell me about yourself, I will start talking about potatoes, even in a job interview, because I don't know what people are asking for. But if you say, can you tell me what your current job role is and what a typical day might involve, that gives me a framework to understand what you're asking. So it's not just about, I mean, providing the interview questions in advance is brilliant. That's really good, because it helps people do their best work. And if you can make them sort of more clear, use that semantic prompting, so you're able to, the person's able to give you the answer that you're looking for, then that helps everyone even more. And it also, they did a study on this at the University of Bath last year, and they found that not only the autistic people did better, but everybody did better using that. So it's one of those things that we were talking about with the systemic inclusion and the universal accommodations. You do that for the neurodiverse people, and then everybody else benefits. So thank you for that, Julie. Lee Hollands asked, what can we do to make the dreaded assessment centre more accessible to neurodiverse talent? Lee, can you explain what you mean by assessment centre? Because I'm not entirely sure that I know what you mean, if you're able to.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lee.
Hiya there. It's been a great session. I've taken so much from this. I just think I work for a company where we try to bring talent in periodically, and we had assessment centres where it involved seeing people acting in role play scenarios, including interview questions as well. But it's testing so many different things, so many different aspects to that process. It's almost like, what can we do as an organisation to try to be more embracing, to bring that talent in? So how, it's really interesting what you said there about the interview questions in advance and how that could help, someone with autism, but then, someone with ADHD, it won't help at all because it's so scattergun and need that sort of that focus directly there. So I was just intrigued to see if you had any sort of thoughts that you've seen from other organisations or any ideas on that.
Yeah, it's well, there's lots of different things you can do. I think one thing that I like to do is provide information in more than one format. So you probably didn't notice in the presentation, everything that was written I said out loud. So if you can't read or you can't see, then you still get the information. So I was providing it in two different ways. It wasn't a lot of work for me to do that, because as you can see, so it's not, again, it's not a big deal, but having and doing things like having a mix of words and pictures for people who can't read very well can be very useful. So it's just sort of thinking around what might somebody appreciate if they, if they can't read or if they can't focus, and sort of coming at it from their point of view. But I think one of the best things to do is to ask the people who are coming, what would make this easier for you? Or, what would help? Because a lot of these situations are very stressful for people like us. So if you said, what would make this less stressful, you might find some interesting answers coming from the people who are coming to the to your assessment centre. Yeah. And it can, do you know what? It can be as simple as a door, like a sign on the door. Because if you go to a thing, they say, go to this place, and you get there, and there's 4 floors, and there's a staircase, and the lift's over there, and there's a room over there, and you don't know where you're supposed to go. And for a lot of people, that's quite anxiety inducing. So just like saying, this thing, go here, do this, and preparing people can be, it's simple stuff that can help people. Does that answer your question? You're still unmuted, Lee? Is that helpful? I think we've got Jo Farmer has raised her hand, and we've got a question from A in the chat.
Sorry, I went to answer the front door. What was the question? Sorry.
Your question, A. Sorry.
Okay. Do you know, like, you're having a very good talk this evening around neurodiversity, and you're hitting some great points of what's happening inside my mind, my head, my body. But I haven't learned what that is. You are telling me what it is, because I don't know what it is. So when I say a mentor, I mean like a life skill coach, but one who's got the common sense that you've got to explain this is what's happening. I.e., for example, the question that you asked around work, when they asked you the first question, you would start drawing pictures because you wouldn't have a clue what they were asking you. But when they ask you to explain how your day-to-day function or running in a work placement is, you could answer that question. So, you know, just to get an education around the practical, what's happening in the neuros around the learning. Does that make, is that clear?
I think you're asking about where you can go for you know, some mentoring or support where somebody actually understands you and won't tell you to do stupid stuff. There are lots of coaches available in private practice, like I do. They do tend to be quite expensive. They are job coaches though, and there are more and more that that work with neurodiverse people who have a better understanding. So they're I don't have one to hand, but I know they have them through various centres and I think government support as well. It is quite hard to find them sometimes, because I work with a lot of coaches as well, and some of them are incredible. They just you know, they do amazing work, but some don't really understand. So it can be a little bit of work to find those mentors and those coaches and the support. If you're struggling to find some, I've found that online groups can be very helpful and very supportive, and they're sometimes they're around the tools that people use for neurodiverse support. So it might not necessarily be a dyslexia group on Facebook or ADHD Twitter or autistic hashtags or whatever, but some of the tools that people use around, you know, software for dyslexics or accountability services for that people with ADHD use. Those sorts of communities can be very, very helpful because the people in them understand what you're saying and often give really good advice. I myself have received some great advice from communities like that. So that the short answer to your question is that support does exist. It can be a little bit tricky to find, but again, you're welcome to connect with me, and if you'd like, we can do some digging and work out, if you want, what you need and where we can find that.
Definitely, I will do that. And your contact details is in the chat. It is, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I've put my website in there, and I've replied to Julie with my email address as well.
Yeah. All right, and again, I'd like to say thank you very much. This is off the scale, 1 in a million needed, and there needs to be more of it. There are a lot of things recognized now in the public and getting bigger around neurodiversity and mental health and well-being. Well, it still needs to have more events like you have to really let people like myself understand that we are appreciated and we are normal. We just learn and do things in a much different way than the linear people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I really appreciate your kind words.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Thank you, A. Jo Farmer has her hand up, and we've got 2 minutes left.
Yes, briefly. Apparently I'd stood out all my life, but I hadn't realised that I discovered I got autism when, like so many women in particular, it seems, I got through to panel, to performance panel. And then with diagnosis, it actually made a lot of sense. And I was blamed for not understanding what I've been told ever so clearly by neurotypicals.
Yeah.
I think we know all that. We know that story, don't we?
Yeah.
But basically, I found it's how I now disclose when I'm on forms. Other people say not to, because you can get biased against it. Sort of, how safe is it to do so? To say, oh, I've got autism. Oh, disability. Rain Man.
That's a good question. 73% of job seekers don't disclose at interview stage. That's of neurodiverse job seekers. I mean, that's according to Achievability, which was a government study. So you are in the majority if you do not disclose. This is something that I get asked quite a lot, and it's a decision for you personally, but it's also a decision that depends on the different situations that you're in. Because if you were to apply to a job that had neurodiversity inclusive splashed all over it, had the Neurodiversity Association logo on it, then obviously that's going to be fine. If you're not sure, that would be a decision for you to make, you know, as you went through the process. And I want to point something out as well, is that disclosing can be a privilege, because some people, you know, you say you should disclose, you should be honest, we need to do the advocacy work, blah, blah, blah. If you need a job and you need money to pay for your rent and pay for your food, then you don't always have that privilege. And it's not a good thing, but I think we need to recognize that, because I've heard people say, oh yeah, you should always disclose. But, you know, the reality is, you know, you need a job, you may or may not have a lot of choice in what kind of job you're going for and so on. So it's absolutely your decision. And you can feel your way according to the, you know, according to how you're finding the process and what you feel how you might feel it's going to go when you're, you know, when you're going through the recruitment process.
I'm fortunately in a role where I love the hyper focus of getting details just right, and I can see where there will be a problem if something's not done properly. Yeah,
that's a great autistic strength. And I think when some people are choosing to disclose, then, you know, saying you're good at X, Y, and Z, you know, is because in whole or in part because you're autistic. That really helps to, we shouldn't have to sell it in, but the reality is we do sometimes have to. And I've been advising somebody last week saying, you know, the being autistic is a good thing in this specific job for these specific reasons, because that's not something you can really argue with if you're proving yourself.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll get in contact with you.
Yeah. I think we're at time now, Tom, and I think I've answered all the questions that
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Again, I know I've already mentioned, but I really appreciate the time and effort to present the talk. I know you displayed your contact details, but with your permission, I will send a message to everyone who signed up to the event, just to sort of provide that to them as well. As I know that people may feel like they've missed that slide or whatever. And also to anyone who's still on the call as well, this will be, it has been recorded throughout and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So I'll make sure I share details of our YouTube channel, and hopefully we can have host one of your talks in the future. Rachel would be really pleased if we could get that arranged. So yeah, thank you. I know we're slightly over time, so I really appreciate the effort to answer all the questions as well, and hope everyone has a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Rachel. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.